Hi, I'm Rohan Poddar. I'm the Chief Storyteller and Managing Partner at Rohan Poddar Creative Media LLP. But I'm also your host for this webinar titled The Brand Storytelling Dialogue. And we have an eclectic panel of three speakers. Let me introduce them real quick. Priyanka Naik is currently managing external communications portfolio for India region at Infineon Technologies, a world leader in semiconductors. She has an eventful experience, beg your pardon, of over 14 years across different verticals of marketing, including content creation, public relations, employee engagement, campaign management, and social media. Ketaki comes with around 12 years of experience in branding, marketing communications, corporate communications, and sales. Currently, she leads brand communications and digital marketing at Mahindra Logistics Limited. Sanjay Singh is the sales coach of India. He empowers brands like LG, Airtel, ICICI, Godrej, Kohler, SIS, and many others as a corporate trainer. He believes that business development as a function is all about storytelling. So here we go. Let me dive directly into this webinar and let me start off with the first question to Priyanka. Priyanka, do you think storytelling as a technique is effective in communication or is it just a fad?
Firstly, thank you so much for the wonderful introduction, Rohan. Glad to be here. And to your question, actually, I don't know where this question is coming from, considering that, storytelling it's been existing since time immemorial. I mean, we have all grown up on stories, we've grown up on Panchatantra, Ramayana, Mahabharata. These are all, and these are not just stories. They have been the means of communicating complex concepts of morality, life, values that can be easily digested by humans and human brains. So the concept of storytelling has actually been existing for a while now, forever kinds. And there's nothing new about the concept of storytelling. But yes, the way that we are using it in brand communication at the moment, that is something that we're still exploring. And that is something that I believe is still very, very it's something that I think it can really help the brand reach limits, because I believe that narratives can be used to develop trust with your audiences, and also they help you to increase the knowledge retention, as well as the ability and willingness of the audiences by to learn and to then take action on what you'll be sharing. So because stories are so much more easily comprehensible for your audiences, it helps make our audiences more emotionally receptive of facts that we are throwing at them, and hence chances increase that they will respond and act on this knowledge that you're sharing with them. So I believe that yes, when then done correctly, storytelling can be a really powerful tool, because it will help you create an emotional connection along with the narrative, the contextual narrative that you're creating.
Right. So true and so true. Keki, what would you say to that?
Yeah, hi Rohan. Again, thank you for this opportunity to let me share my views here in this forum today. So as Priyanka correctly mentioned, I think it is storytelling is far from being a fad. It's actually a tried and tested technique for literally all of us. I mean, all of us grew up listening to stories as kids. So as kids, do you remember how stories gave you a foundation to think, to dream, to imagine, to desire? How stories were a window to your innocent and inquisitive soul. See, as adults, I believe we do not stop feeling all these emotions. I mean, we may be definitely way more rational and practical in our approach and decisions as adults. But the ultimate reason why we do what we do is rooted in a certain emotion that we inherently seek. Be it happiness, be it pride, be it fulfillment, be it freedom, be it power. And the storytelling technique identifies and exactly taps into this particular emotion and builds a way deeper connection with your target audience than any tall claims of how good your product or service or whatever it is that you're trying to sell is. And in this day and age, when consumers have exposure to multiple brands and are spoiled for choice, getting their attention can be increasingly difficult. And hence, storytelling can give brands an opportunity to relate to their customers by sharing the same values, and hence gain their loyalty. And as marketers and communicators, I think that's what we all want, right? Customer loyalty.
Right, right. Yeah, that makes so much of sense. Sanjay, you come from a sales standpoint. What would you want to say about that?
Yeah, so thank you very much, Rohan, and the two beautiful girls on the screen here. See, storytelling for me is very much a biological phenomenon. So there is a biology to it. When we tell a story, we create an apprehension in the minds of the customer. We create an expectation when they're looking for what next. So a good story is something which communicates what next and makes the customer excited about it. And I'm told by doctors that this excitement is what exudes dopamine and adrenaline in your brain and helps you move, get connected to the storyline faster. So yes, storytelling is not a fad for sure. It's very much a scientific phenomena. And the sooner we master the art of storytelling, the better it is. Because customers don't like to hear the truth. They like to arrive at the truth, especially through storytelling. You co-create that journey with the customer where they arrive at the truth. And they always love the fact that they have reached the truth. They don't love the fact that you have told them the truth. So this gap is always filled by storytelling. So yes, I think it is something which must be practiced by everyone. It's definitely not a fad.
Correct, correct. And the applicability of storytelling is so cogent across different areas: marketing, branding, communication, sales. What makes me think at this point is that there definitely must be a story in your subconscious mind that you must have seen at some time in the past or maybe recently that makes you feel that, wow, this is a story. And there's a reason why it has stayed in your mind. What do you think, Sanjay? What do you think that story is for you?
So stories are great when they have an impact on your mind, and they kind of crisscross the time machine. I still strongly remember the story which Cadbury told us, I think 20 years back, on the cricket field where a girl comes dancing in and super excitement and joy. So a very simple act, a very small story. I think it was done by Lintas as an agency. Very impactful. Even today, when I think of highest level of excitement, that story comes to my mind immediately. That's something which I like to ape in any super excitement story that I'm trying to say. So the simplicity of the story actually makes it great. The complexity doesn't make it great. And professionals like us are there to actually convert a complex phenomena into a very, very simple story. Right?
Right. Yeah, that's true. Even I recall that Cadbury ad, I think it's from probably the early 90s, 1992. Ketaki, what would be that story for you that stayed with you?
Yeah, the brand film of Vicks, hashtag Touch of Care, is what really touched me and is etched in my memory. It is based on the true story of a trans woman, Gauri Sawant, who is raising an orphaned girl as her own against all odds. And the story is from the perspective of this orphaned girl who wants to become a lawyer when she grows up, so that she can ensure equal civil rights for Gauri and all other transgenders in India. Now, the story has got nothing to do with Vicks. In fact, it does not even show Vicks prominently anywhere in the entire film. I mean, just in one frame, and that's defocused. But it captures the emotion of care so beautifully, which can indirectly relate to Vicks in the way we care for our loved ones when they're sick and down with cold and cough. So yeah, that is what I can remember.
Yeah, and that was a phenomenal story, and I would completely agree with you. I love that story as well, where the Vicks just comes at a fag end of the story. Priyanka, what's it for you?
Okay, both are beautiful stories, by the way, and I think I remember both of them. But I wanted to, like, when I really think of a story that has kept me engaged in terms of how a brand has really been able to engage with its customers really well, I want to pick up a story that happened more recently in 2000, and I think it's mid 2000. 2011, 2010. So should be about 2015 or so, if I remember correctly. And this was the story of Maggie, because in 2015, Maggie was embroiled in a controversy, a major controversy. And they were off the shelves for about half a year. I think about half a year. Now, they couldn't obviously brand. It wouldn't make sense because people couldn't buy that product anywhere, right? They had kind of pulled back their products. But what they did was amazing, because they took into consideration all the brand that they had created over the years, over the decades that they had been in India. And they put this out to the audiences, and they launched a campaign called We Miss You Too. Again, Maggie, they didn't even ask people to kind of mention Maggie, etc., but they wanted audiences to launch their own stories and their own memories of the brand. And they wanted them to launch these as a series of stories that was digitally, it was a digital campaign. So I think virtually people started releasing it on social media. I think that was a brilliant campaign. I mean, there's no one story that I want to kind of push out there that I would say that, okay, this was the video that I wanted to look at, but I'm talking about the emotions of people and the kind of engagement that the brand could actually get out of a time. You know, it was probably a crisis management campaign for them. But my God, it was, I think, one of the most successful campaigns that Maggie has seen. So I think that is one campaign that I always go back to when I want to kind of think about how to engage with the audiences and how to get the audiences involved in the stories that you're wanting to create.
Right, right. Yeah, again, three lovely examples of storytelling, all of which I'm sure most of our audience out there would be acquainted with, would be familiar with, or probably even love. My question here at this point is, clearly something makes for a good story, impactful story. Now there could be, as a brand stiller, I understand there are a whole host of things that are responsible for creating a very effective and impactful story that stays in the minds of the audience. I would like to know from each of you what that ingredient or ingredients are that make a story effective. Anybody of you could pick it up and start from.
So, Rohan, I, I personally feel that everyone is trying to understand their target markets well. Everyone is trying to understand the buying behavior pattern, right? And I'm sure market research has gone to that end, and there's so much of data analytics available in the open market to help you arrive at those conclusions much simpler now. I remember when I was young, like these beautiful girls, we didn't have any such tools. So we had to depend on AC Nielsen reports, and only big companies could buy them. But all throughout, I have seen that the capability to convert the deliverables into a metric which you can measure actually makes the whole difference, because outer layer concepts like segmentation, targeting, profiling, understanding the pain point of the customer, and blah 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 blah. These are outer layer communications, which is there and which must be followed. Now, this whole process of discovery, where you're trying to understand as to what is that one unique message that you want to communicate, is very important. So a storyteller restricts his story to one message and not multiple messages. And I see a lot of big companies making that mistake, trying to build in a lot of messages. It's like a designer saying कि paper में जगह खाली है तो और भी कुछ डाल दो, and making it fully cluttered. So how do you translate the deliverables into a metric? And then how do you monitor that metric in your discovery process is what I feel makes a huge difference. And that's where professionals are required, because we are looking at very intangible terms. We are not looking at things which are very tangible, easily quantifiable. But still, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. So we got to measure things. And I think that this is a huge science now. Unfortunately, in our country, this science is not taught as a subject, but it's a huge science. It's a full study in itself. Just being a student of marketing or communication or brand management doesn't really make you eligible to get into those metrics. So you really have to deep dive yourself into those metrics. So yeah, if you can arrive at the right metrics, bingo, I'm sure you're heading towards a great story, is what I feel.
Correct. Arriving at the right metrics. So that's what Sanjay says. What would any of you, Priyanka, if you could elaborate more?
So I definitely agree with Sanjay. I think he's bang on. Yes, metric is very important. And luckily today we have good metric options. Like, the digital space gives us a lot of options to arrive at better metric and more, like he said, scientifically, you can approach metric more scientifically these days. So definitely that is something that we should look at when we are launching a campaign. I also see that, when we are developing stories, when we get briefs for developing stories, we are not really given an objective. Like, sometimes you don't have objectives which are very clear. We're just given a very generic objective. We want to become number one. It's not an objective. It's a very generic. Everybody wants to become there. And I just kind of, that's not what my team tells me. But I'm just giving you a generic example that the objectives can be very generic at times. And my role then as a storyteller becomes that I go back to the team, and this takes a bit of time, by the way. It's a lot of back and forth because sometimes the teams that are coming to you, even themselves don't know what they want to achieve out of that campaign. Metric is, of course, an important part, and it comes at a stage when your objective is defined. But without the objective, I think it becomes very difficult to even understand where do you want to start exploring your story from. What do you want to really say? What is your key message going to be like? And this can be broken down, like, say, for instance, Sanjay mentioned that you should have one message, which is true. Every story should have one message, but then every company may have 3 or 4 different types of stories, with each one concentrating on a certain message. And then that also kind of evolves because, your company is not going to be there for 2 years or 3 years. It's going to be over decades. So you can always break your stories into 3 years and 5 years, and then, further. And if it's not working out, you change it. Another thing I really feel in today's social media, where we are at the space of social media, is authenticity. Really, really important, because I believe that most times, say, for instance, I get a call from one of my teams and they say, we want to launch a testimonial campaign. We want our employees to talk about us. And they're like, okay, so you start scripting. And I'm like, I can't, because I haven't spoken to the individual yet. The individual has a personal stake in this story. They need to tell me what they feel before I actually put that testimonial down. A lot of companies don't do that. A lot of storytellers don't do that. They think that what they are thinking or what the brand is thinking is what needs to go out there. But sometimes that's not how it works. You need to be able to hear well, listen well, and then figure what the story really is. And then maybe, there's obviously a mix and match in terms that you're going to fit it into the overall umbrella, the messaging of the corporate, but there has to be an individuality to the story that you're wanting to tell. And therein comes in authenticity, which I believe is something that pretty much every storyteller should look into if they want to deliver effectiveness at the end of it. People are very smart, audiences are very smart. Ketaki mentioned earlier in, during when she was talking right in the beginning, that there's so many brands that are fighting for the same space. So authenticity can actually give you originality as well, and that will help you set apart your story from the rest of the world.
Right.
That's it. Thank you.
Right. Keki, what would you say about that?
Yeah, I think an effective brand story places your target audience as the main character in your narrative, not your brand or your product. And to do that, marketers need to understand that target audience very well, what they want, what resonates with them. And effective brand story needs to invoke an emotion, that the target audience can relate to, and something important to them. Now, here I would like to state an example of what we did at Mahindra Logistics. When we defined our purpose statement, accelerating commerce, empowering communities to rise, we introduced it through an audiovisual fictional film. The story revolves around the family of a young man from an Indian village who is facing a drought and unable to make ends meet. So he joins Mahindra Logistics to work as a truck driver and changes his situation from poverty and hopelessness to prosperity and financial growth. Um, while his family back home obviously continues to engage in agriculture. Now, this film plays on the emotion of aspiration very well, and I think that is one of every an effective brand story has to pick one emotion that their target audience can relate to, and actually build their story around them, keeping the target audience as the center of attention and focus, and then build it around that. And I think that's the fundamental. And if you get that right, then definitely, as Priyanka and Sanjay mentioned, that your objectives need to be in place, your metrics need to be in place before you start off, so that then you are not lost midway and doing things randomly and ad hoc. So yes, I think that is what I would like to say.
I'm so glad all three of you kind of uh, brought it down to certain very specifics about storytelling. But now I want you to do reverse. I want all of you to actually jog your mind and run your imagination wild. And I would, and this may sound in the realm of fantasy, but if, let's say, hypothetically, as brand leaders and brand communicators in your own right, if you didn't have the constraints of budget or a timeline, what kind of story or stories would you like to tell for your own brand? So, Ketaki, you may start.
Okay. So if I did not have the constraints of budget or time, I think I would like to base my brand story on care. Care for your people and care for the environment. I would want to create a brand film consisting of 5 mini stories from the perspective of our stakeholders, wherein they speak about how Mahindra Logistics has touched their lives. For example, a customer can speak about how his company values the sustainable and efficient transportation and warehousing operations, that we do. A business associate can share his growth story of how Mahindra Logistics helped him grow, how supported, give him support and guidance. An LGBT employee, just to give a reference here, actually, Mahindra Logistics is an LGBTQ inclusive company, and we encourage hiring, retention, and engagement and development of LGBT, employees and associates from the LGBTQ community. So to add to this story of mine, I would actually like an LGBT employee to share their story on how the company treats them and how it makes them feel at home. Another mini story that I would want is a driver sharing his story. So driver is a very important stakeholder for us being in logistics. Driver is a backbone of the logistics industry, frankly, and it is extremely important that they get they get the dignity, job dignity of labor that they actually should. So I would want a driver to share his story of how we take care of him through our driver welfare programs, which relate to his health, safety, skill development, engagement. Then another mini story would be a village resident sharing his story of how we've improved the quality of life of the people in his village through our village adoption programs. So basically all our stakeholders, right from customers, employees, the communities that we touch, the driver community, the business part, associates that we work with. So we are an asset-light model and we work with a lot of business associates. So, growing with them is what we realize is a win-win situation for all of us. So definitely I would like my story to, focus on all of these stakeholders. And another aspect, actually, if I didn't have the constraints of budget or time, is I would also like to completely switch to environment-friendly infrastructure, materials, processes, products, and service offerings, so that I can, I would strive to make my brand reputation synonymous to going green, because I think sustainability is the need of the hour, and it is a non-negotiable according to me.
Right. Well said. Well said. At this point, I'll just like to ask the audience to put their questions in the chat box so that we can take them up after this. Right. Back to the discussion. So, Priyanka, if you didn't have the constraints and of the budget and of the time, as you always complain you have, what kind of story would you like to tell?
Well, actually, I think I was mentioning this to you earlier before the webinar started. The sky is the limit. You can do pretty much anything under the sun that you want to do. The only problem I face there is then if you don't have a constraint, if you don't, I'm not going to call that a constraint, by the way. I'm going to call them guidelines. And, because if you don't have a structure in place, frankly, then as brand communicators, we might not even be able to finish a project, because then you can just, like how writers are, if they're not given deadlines and they can just keep working on the story and bettering their story every time. There's always a better story. There's always a way to make it better. So there's absolutely no end to it. So actually having a structure in place, having guidelines in place, or having a budget in place helps you, because it helps make that target of your story achievable. It makes it, if you have a deadline, in 3 months, what is achievable for you in 3 months. You're not dreaming of a fantasy land and developing stories which are probably never going to come true. I would rather develop stories and have them out for my audiences to watch than sit on 3 years and then scrap the whole idea because I have no constraint. But the kind of stories that really excite me as a person and as a communicator is person stories. I really find them very exciting. I think there's and when I say person stories, I mean approachable stories, like stories that humanize. I belong to a hardcore technology firm, okay, and semiconductors, even I don't understand. I'm not from a semiconductor background, not an engineer. So I sit down across the table with my teams, extremely technical, and there are times when I have to literally go down to saying I don't understand, layperson. So I realize how many of my audiences out there actually don't understand my brand, because they don't get to feel my brand. They don't know what we do. And as semiconductors, as it is, we're not really selling a product. We are a B2B company, so we are selling components which go into products. So it's hard to define what we do. So the stories I want to do, I think that I want to create for my brand, would always be to humanize my brand. I want to be able to tell stories of engineers, the kind of work that they do and how that's impacting the world, because as a company, we are making lives easier, safer, and greener. That's our mission statement. And we really internally internalize this, and everything that we do, we try and correlate to this mission statement within the company. So I want to be able to develop stories that can actually can be tied back to making lives easier, safer, and greener.
Yeah, that sounds like a very good goal to have. What would you say, Sanjay? What would be your favorite story to tell?
Yeah, first of all, I took a cue from what Ketaki said, that her company is LGBTQ friendly. I do a lot of work with the LGBTQ community. We have an NGO here called Sarthi at Nagpur, which has close to 4,000 LGBTQ members. So this is just a small digression, Ketaki, but I would love to know, how do I connect them to your people who can then, screen them on merit and employ? Coming back to Rohan's question, constraint, I fully agree to Priyanka. Constraint, without constraint, we are talking of utopia, and utopia exists only in heaven, and we are not in heaven, we are on earth. So let's stay grounded. What could be a story? I'm a salesman by birth, and I'm a sales coach by profession. So in fact, this is a story which is already in the making. We run an online university where we offer degrees in sales, in various aspects of sales. So we are working on a story where the emotion that we are going to catch is the self-esteem of a salesperson. The whole storytelling started that no father in India wants to give their girl on marriage to a salesman. He is not an aspired profession, right? So that's where it started, and I said that self-image of a salesperson is very important. We are working on a story where I can create a tiger out of a salesperson. So the story revolves around a fresher who becomes a tiger, as in tiger, roaming around in the jungle, and the jungle translates into a market. So we are working around that, where the target group are freshers who want to make a career for themselves in sales. So yeah, that's the story with which I'm working out. When you triggered me with the question that let's start thinking right, so I started thinking that, why not have a story on the ideal sales negotiation, or a story on ideal sales pitch, a story on ideal sales presentation? Yeah, but all my stories will revolve around making a salesman feel like a tiger in letter and spirit both.
Right, right. And I think you three of you have really proved that storytelling is really an open canvas. It's a way of thinking rather than technique. So my first question, which was, is it a good technique or not? I would want to rephrase that again. But thanks again. I think we don't have much time left on the webinar. I might be able to take a couple of questions. I see one question from Akash. And he says, my name is Akash. I head sales for Hive Minds. We are a digital marketing agency. We work with clients like Big Basket, Domino's, Cult Fit. Would like to know how to leverage brand storytelling during our sales pitch. So I think Sanjay, this looks like a question for you. But yeah, both of you, Priyanka and Ketaki, can feel free to take a dig at it. So he's basically asking, how would you leverage brand storytelling for sales pitch?
So Akash, first of all, you have to be very clear about your brand architecture and your brand promise. What is the brand personality that you have, and what is the perception that you're trying to create in your customer's mind? So those will be a few homework that you have to do first. When it comes to pitching yourself in front of your customer, I would just like to say that if you pitch who you are and what you do, you'll always be shown the door. If you pitch what pain, risk, need, or challenge of the customer you can solve, B, you can solve them in a profitable manner for the customer. C, you can solve them in a profitable manner sustainably. So if you can do these three things in your sales pitch, you will fall in love with the customer, or vice versa. If not, you can do a tandev, you can do a breakdance, you can do a cabaret if you want, but you will not get the door.
Right, right. Priyanka and Ketaki, any one of you want to answer, or should I take up the next question?
No, I think Sanjay did a fantastic job of answering that one.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll take one last question here. This is from Millie, and she says that when we talk about storytelling, do we always need to create a fiction? Because sharing anything real is just fact sharing. Okay, this is a very interesting question. When we are actually telling reality, she's saying that tantamounts to being factual. What would be your tip?
Okay, so if I were to take this up, I would say that's not true. Storytelling has various facets. It depends on the kind of storytelling that you're talking about at the moment. Are you talking about a brand storytelling? Are you talking about just a campaign storytelling? Are you talking about something what Sanjay mentioned? He wants to do a story where he wants to hero the salesperson as a tiger, right? That is fantasy. That is something that's probably not real, but it has a connection to how he wants people to perceive that particular story. So there are various facets and various ways of storytelling. I'll give you an example. I was, and this is a factual thing that we turned into storytelling. So I was in my previous firm, I was also with a semiconductor firm, and it was a phone chip maker. And the problem that they faced in India was that they were a Chinese company and they were not very cost effective. And they had generally a very bad reputation in terms of that, they're probably cheap, and there were a lot of negative connotations with the brand, or neutral connotations. When we did our market research, we realized that very few or none actually positive reviews existed. Now, what we did was we actually went ahead and we started understanding facts. And what is it that the company was really doing in the country, and what is it that we were able to achieve in the country? Because the numbers were really good, the sales was really good. It's just the perception was not that great. And what eventually was the final thing, what we used as our storytelling, main element of our storytelling, was that we were enabling the Indian brands to create a market and for themselves, basically. So the nationalistic angle was kind of used to change the perception, and that worked really well for the advantage of the brand, because we saw a change in the perception of the brand after a few years of delivering this storytelling technique. So we used the fact, figured out what was the main USP and how it was really delivering an impact in the country, and that eventually helped change the perception.
Right. Right.
If I may add.
Sure, sure.
Yeah. So I think storytelling does not necessarily, definitely doesn't need to be in a fiction way as well. You can also say, you can also speak about facts, but it actually really depends on how you narrate. I think storytelling is more of the how than the what, you know. So if a fact, you are portraying it and then you're communicating in a way that the target audience can relate to, and it makes it easier for them to relate to. And emotions are usually a very effective tool to relate to people. Emotions make it easy for people to understand what is it that we are trying to communicate. If that can be done, then even facts can be communicated without a fictional story. Definitely more of a medium. Yeah.
Right, right. I'm afraid we've run out of time and I will have to close this session, but I really want to thank you, all three of you, for making time this afternoon to be a part of this and expressing your views on brand storytelling, which is a very favorite topic of mine, and I'm assuming favorite topic for all those who have participated. Also, a big shout out to all the people who have participated on this webinar. We'll keep doing this again. So watch out for communication on the brand storytelling dialogue, and have a great Friday afternoon and a happy weekend thereafter. So thank you all, and bye bye.
Thank
you so much.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Priyanka, take care.
You
Great
too,
meeting you.
Sanjay. Bye, Ketaki.
Bye. Bye. Thank you, everyone.